Hi, I'm Bill Edler. In No Limit Hold'em, one of the most important pieces of information that's available to you is the size of your opponent's bet. Learning to interpret what small and big bets likely mean will give you great opportunities to outplay your table mates. What you're going to see in this lesson will be an evaluation of bet sizes made by your average opponent. Be sure to note that this doesn't apply to your heavyweight, sophisticated player. They're so good at randomizing bet sizes that it's hard to infer anything from them. Here's what we're going to cover in this lesson. The first item is pre-flop bet patterns. Occasionally you'll see people bet more than what's normal for the table, and you need to know what that means. And of course, occasionally people will bet less, and we need to play accordingly. Post-flop betting patterns. We'll take a look at the betting patterns that exist after the flop and on the turn, and what we should infer from them. And finally, river bets. We'll look to see whether your opponent is bluffing or whether he's value betting. You may well read in poker literature that pre-flop raises are 3 times the big blind. In my experience, that's sometimes true, but actually tables get into their own rhythms. Sometimes a table can be found to have a standard pre-flop raise of 3.5 times, or 4 times, 4.5 times, as low as 2.5 times, but just becomes standard. It's like a hand gets dealt out, someone makes it 2.5 times, everyone folds. It goes again, now someone else's turn to raise, they make it 2.5 times. A table will often have a standard bring-in that is not necessarily that 3 times the blind that you might read of in poker literature. Important to note what that is, because when someone deviates from that, they're telling you something about their hand. Now we're going to look at a couple of examples of deviations from a standard opening raise. In this example, the blinds are 50 and 100, and we'll assume that the standard bring-in is 3 times the big blind. We'll say $300. The first few people pass, and it goes to Benny, who has 9,000 in front of him. As you can see, all the stack sizes are relatively deep compared to the blinds. Benny chooses to pre-flop raise, and now it's our turn. Whatever you do in this situation, be sure you notice that this pre-flop raise was not standard. If he had made it 300, we wouldn't know anything about his raise or his hand. He might have aces, he might have deuces, he might have anything that he might raise with pre-flop. But by betting more, he's giving you information about his hand. And it's important that you take that into consideration before playing your hand. What I can tell you about his hand through my experience is that it's a pretty good hand, but it's not a monster. If he had aces or kings, he wouldn't want to steal the blinds, so he'd be afraid to raise so much. And I can tell you for some reason that with real weak hands, people also don't make unusually high raises. You might think that they would to steal the blind, but they just don't. They generally make a standard raise, hope that that's good enough to steal the blinds, or perhaps, if called, then they'll be able to play the hand in position. When people make a larger raise like this, although it's not aces or kings, it's a good hand. It could be ace-king, ace-queen, maybe ace-queen suited, or a moderate to high pair, maybe eights through queens. Once you've determined that he has just a medium strength hand, it becomes less important what your cards are, because you can exploit his smaller range. One opportunity is to re-raise with any 2 cards, because most opponents won't be able to withstand a re-raise with just a medium strength hand. Another option, if you don't think it's that kind of an opponent, some people do kind of dig in, and poker is very much a people game. So if you don't think it's that kind of guy that where a re-raise is likely to work, some people get offended and defend or whatever, and you just kind of need to know the guy you're playing against, or lady. You may choose just to flat call. And again, you can do this with any 2 cards. Because when the flop comes down in at least 8 out of 10 times, he or she doesn't have much, and there's something scary out there, and with position, you're going to be able to take down the pot. Again, in this example, the blinds are 50 and 100. We'll assume that the normal bring-in at the table is 300. All stacks are deep, and the first couple players fold to Timmy. He announces